Geek Therapy Radio.
Welcome to Geek Therapy Radio. I am your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. Just a reminder real quick that the podcast is fresh and new 5 days a week. I will admit right now that over the holidays, I wasn't anticipating how difficult it would be to put out 5 fresh podcasts per week. I don't think I've done any less than a minimum of 3 podcasts per week, so I thank my regular listeners for bearing with me with that. If I haven't reminded you before, I like being in control of my own show, of my own podcast, of my own YouTube channel and everything. By the way, the YouTube channel is now over 2,000 subscribers, so thank you very much for that, too. It used to be a big fat 0, so it's not lost on me that the channel is growing and that I have you to thank for that. But there's nobody else on the team here at Geek Therapy Radio. So answering emails, talking to potential sponsors, meeting with potential sponsors, editing the show, editing the YouTube videos. I am constantly running Cakewalk Sonar in Sony Vegas Pro. I know that maybe I should be using Final Cut or Adobe Premiere or DaVinci, whatever. I have downloaded DaVinci Resolve, and there is a learning curve with it. Every video editing software does the same thing at the end, but there is a learning curve to learning the nuances of each and interfaces of each video editing software. Same thing with audio editing software. I had a listener recommend DaVinci Resolve to me, and I truly appreciate that. And it's a goal of mine to learn really it all boils down to cost, really. If we're talking about video editing, DaVinci Resolve is free. It can be free. I mean, legally free, not like pirated free, but they do offer free download of DaVinci Resolve. But it's expensive. Well, I would like to learn Adobe Premiere. It's just expensive. Everything is subscription-based now, and I almost feel like I almost feel like I don't earn enough with it to justify purchasing it. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, maybe if my YouTube channel was 100,000 subscribers or something like that, and I'm making a decent living off of just YouTube videos, yes, I would invest into Adobe Premiere or even Final Cut, something like that. I think I would go with Premiere more so, because Premiere is multi-platform. You can do it in Windows, you can work it on Microsoft, you can do it on Apple, Mac OS. But yeah, so the bottom line is all aspects of the show is me running it. So I'm not saying I bit off more than I can chew doing 5 podcasts a week, because I love doing it. I absolutely love doing it. But there's some times when just kind of time constraints gets me, and I can't sit down and record a 30-minute thing and then edit it together and then upload it. At minimum, doing a podcast takes an hour at least. And that's pretty low, actually, if you think about it. As far as production value and production time is, because I've got everything. It is, as much as I can make it, I have made it such a streamlined process. I go in there and I swap out the music each day, or most days. The past couple have been the same music. The more astute of you have noticed that the past 2 podcasts have used the exact same music, because my intention was to load both of them onto YouTube. I will mention right now that the podcast about building a $54,000 Mac Pro computer, that was fully intended to go to YouTube. I recorded the video with a Logitech webcam. I had screen capture going as we went over the specs of the Mac Pro and the mentality behind choosing what options that I chose. By the way, this is window shopping. I did not buy a $54,000 Mac Pro, let alone the base model $6,000 Mac Pro. That is just not in the realm of possibility. So I was just doing a fun little window shopping and fun, speccing it out to how I would love to have it with the 1.5 terabytes of RAM. So anyways, that I intended for that to be a video and release that video, but the video was it wasn't corrupt. The timing was just so off. The sync was just way off from the audio recording. Usually I go in and I sync up the audio to the video's audio and get it all nice and crispy like that. polished like that, but the video off the Logitech webcam, and I'm blaming this on Windows, not on Logitech. I just used the Windows built-in video recorder. Unusable. The video was just unusable trash, completely out of sync with the audio. It was a nightmare to work with, or even start to work with. And it recorded at 19 frames per second. Just trash. So that's why there's no video to accompany the Mac Pro build out podcast. I did just upload a video version of the podcast regarding the new Microsoft Series X. That is, or the Xbox Series X, that is uploaded to YouTube right now. You can go watch it right now on YouTube. I go over some features and the design. In the comments, I go over some rumored specs of the Microsoft Xbox Series X. A lot of the video, I mentioned that how it's the worst name ever. On the PlayStation side, their competitor is PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5 coming out. Xbox is just a screaming child in the corner as far as the names. It's alphabet soup. It's nonsense. We had Xbox 360, a bunch of different versions of the Xbox 360, and then we went to Microsoft or the Xbox One, Xbox One S, Xbox One E, and now we're at Xbox Series X. My goodness, Microsoft. My freaking goodness. Just name your console something easy. We're at the 8th generation right now for Xbox consoles. I mean, we can debate that back and forth. This is the 9th generation of consoles, period, on the whole, but this is the 8th generation of Microsoft's Xbox. Just call it Xbox 8. I mean, at least that's simple. No, it doesn't roll off your tongue. But does Xbox Series X roll off the tongue? Nope. Just call it the Xbox 8. It's just so clean, so simple. I do like the Xbox design, Xbox Series X's design. You can hear all about that and see all about that on the YouTube channel, Geek Therapy Radio on YouTube. And I also talked about it in the last podcast. The YouTube version is just the video version of the same podcast. So more Geek Therapy Radio coming up. I want to go over this buying guide from Ars Technica, this buying guide for the techie, tech enthusiast in your life. I want to see what they have on here, so it's going to be fun. More Geek Therapy Radio coming up. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. I am your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. If you're listening to the podcast version of this, aren't the music transitions nice and smooth? I try to make things as seamless as possible. If you listen to the broadcast, I hope the bump outs don't sound too abrupt. I also, should I or should not I say this? That sounds weird. Yoda I am. I cannot be held responsible for the content of the commercials that you hear between segments of Geek Therapy Radio on the broadcast on KPRC 950 AM. I don't choose the commercials. I don't choose the fill content. I don't choose any of that. So I just hope you know that. Not that I have anything inherently against it. Of course, I'm not going to besmirch my station or anything like that. But let's just say, I mean, there's some subject. Kenny, I freaking love you. Ken Webster, you know that I love you, and we're all a family here at KPRC 950 AM. But there's like, he's way more edgy. He's way more edgy than I am over there in Pursuit of Happiness, and his Phil content is way more edgy than Geek Therapy Radio's Phil content. So, yeah, well, it's all fine and dandy. That's not officially endorsed by Geek Therapy Radio. Whether or not I think it's funny, you know, we can talk about that off air, but it's just not me. Anyways, going back to the music content that bumps in and out, I hope you're appreciating the smoothness of it, especially in the podcast. Music's very important to me, but I hope it doesn't sound too janky on the broadcast. Maybe if I remember, I'll listen to it on my little radio this Saturday night. Okay, let's get on to the list that Ars Technica has chosen for the tech enthusiast in your life, the holiday shopping list for the tech enthusiast in your life. Let's check that now. Okay, this list is in no particular order, so don't think it's ranked by anything because they're all very different gifts. The first thing on their list, on Ars Technica's list, is the Razer Viper gaming mouse. You know, it really depends on how much of a gamer they are, and you'd have to talk to them and be intimately familiar with how seriously they take gaming. If they are running a Twitch channel and they have 1 million followers and subscribers, first of all, they're not going to be using a Razer Viper gaming mouse. They'll be using something probably better than that. Not that the Razer Viper is a bad gaming mouse. I've never used the gaming mouse. It's 69 grams, has a DPI of 16,000, which is intensely accurate. That 16,000 DPI is more resolution than your monitor has, I would think. So bottom line is very articulate in its movements. It's very good for gamers, but you'd have to know that the tech enthusiast in your life was such a prolific gamer to make use of those features. Now, the next on the list is something cool, and I think it applies to way more people than just gamers. They have a SanDisk Extreme Portable Solid State Drive, SanDisk Extreme Portable SSD. It's USB-C, so it enjoys all the USB speeds. It comes in size varieties from 250 gigabytes all the way to 2 terabytes. An external solid state drive is truly. It's what am I looking for? It's like a Leatherman or a Swiss Army knife, or that's not better. It's a hammer to a toolkit. Like, it is something so necessary for any sort of content creator, especially anybody who has a lot of huge files to carry along. An external solid state drive is where it's at. That's a very good gift. And you might be thinking, well, what's the difference between an external solid state drive and an external thumb drive? You can get a thumb drive that's a terabyte. External solid state drives are a little bit bigger than external thumb drives, USB thumb drives, but they are infinitely faster. Yes, those thumb drives, USB thumb drives, are quick, but nothing is quick. Nothing has the transfer speeds of a true solid state drive. So I agree with that on the list. What is it? This is not paid promotion, but it's a SanDisk Extreme Portable Solid State Drive. I'm just saying external solid state drives, portable solid state drives in general. That would be a good gift. I do agree with that. The gift on here that I can already tell that I think I most agree with is the Raspberry Pi 4. I did an entire show, was it last week or the week before? It wasn't my most titillating episode. It wasn't like the most fascinating episode, but I did a whole show about, I anticipate a lot of tech enthusiasts, a lot of geeks are going to get a Raspberry Pi 4 for Christmas this year, for Hanukkah this year, for Kwanzaa this year, whatever you celebrate. There's going to be a lot of Raspberry Pi 4s given as gifts. So I did a whole show dedicated to the basic setup of the Raspberry Pi 4. And I even talked to the CEO of the Raspberry Pi Foundation, Eben Upton, several episodes back. You can go back to the Geek Therapy Radio archives and scan through there and look at I talked to the guy who created the freaking Raspberry Pi movement, and to get his take on the Raspberry Pi 4 and future updates for the Raspberry Pi 4. It's very cool. So yeah, man, Raspberry Pi 4, and they cost at most $55. So that is a very good gift to give to the tech enthusiast in your life. 100% agree with that. Next, this is pretty cool too, the iFixit Pro Tech Toolkit. iFixit has an entire website dedicated to helping DIYers repair their own equipment, repair their own devices, repair their laptops, repair their tablets if possible, repair their game consoles, and they make official toolkits for that. No, this isn't just your traditional screwdrivers and hammers and wedges. These are actually tools specific to such delicate repairs. I don't actually have an iFixit official toolkit, but I do have electronics toolkits, and I cannot recommend them enough for the geek in your life. Apple Pencil, that is very specific. I could think of 1,000 better gifts than an Apple Pencil if you have an Apple iPad, For somebody who has an iPad, I would get them a keyboard case more than anything, like a Logitech keyboard case for an iPad. That's way more use than an Apple Pencil. Then again, if the person in your life with an iPad is an artist and they're drawing all the time or they're designing all the time, the Apple Pencil could be a good buy for them. But just in general, the general person with an iPad, keyboard cover all the way. Next on their list is Cooler Master MH751. It's a gaming headset, so it has a microphone coming out of the headphones. I'm sure it sounds fine. $80 online. I have a Corsair headset. Corsair is kind of a competitor to Cooler Master. A Corsair gaming headset that comes with a 2.4 gigahertz dongle, USB dongle, so it doesn't rely on Bluetooth or anything like that. Bluetooth, by the way, usually there aren't too many Bluetooth gaming headsets because once you start sending signal both direction, the quality of both audio signals degrades significantly. So much so that it sounds like your voice is over the phone, and the audio coming into your ears sounds more phone-like. The fidelity drops. That may change with Bluetooth version 5, but I haven't tested it. I just know that there aren't a lot of Bluetooth headsets. But a good gaming headset, a good pair of gaming headphones, a gaming headset with a microphone, I think that's a good gift for the PC gamer in your life. This next one is a laptop, Lenovo ThinkVision M14. I don't have enough experience with that. Suffice it to say, that is truly exceptionally way more expensive than anything we've talked about so far on this list. So I'm going to go ahead and skip that. The Topper RealForce R2 PFU. What? It's a keyboard. $350. Skip it. Although it does look like a Model M. If it looks like a Model M, you might as well go onto eBay and purchase an actual IBM Model M keyboard. Skip that one. Garmin Fenix 6 Pro smartwatch. If you're going to get someone a smartwatch this year, get them something like I was about to say Pebble. That's long dead. Sad violin noise there. But I'd get them something like a Samsung smartwatch, or if they have an iPhone, get them the Apple Watch. Don't get them, I wouldn't suggest any kind of third-party thing from there. Not that a company like Garmin is considered third-party, but you're going to get way more, I'd say, compatibility with going with something that's well-known, like on the Android side, the Samsung side, the Samsung Galaxy Gear watches, or the Apple Watch. That's going to do it for this segment of Geek Therapy Radio. More Geek Therapy Radio coming up. I'm your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. I am your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. I know it sounds silly to repeat myself if you're just listening to the podcast, but just bear in mind that the Saturday show is also a broadcast on terrestrial radio. So there are a few minutes of commercials between each of these segments, so I have to re-engage the audience, tell them what they're listening to. So if you are in that radio audience, you're listening to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. I mentioned last week that I always forget that I follow the Outlaw Dave show. So thank you for any residual leftover listeners who just got done listening to the Outlaw Dave show. If you're a few snaps into it, a few shots into it, I appreciate you having extra enthusiasm for listening to Geek Therapy Radio. Hope you're enjoying it. And it means a lot to me that people are enjoying it. I don't do it specifically to impress people, if that makes sense. I've long since established, and from many mentors who have given me the same advice, and just learning from people who are well established in the kind of content creation community, the most important thing is to be yourself and then manage growth from there as ethically as possible. So when you listen to me on Geek Therapy Radio, this is me. Now, I will say, in complete full disclosure honesty, that when you listen to me on the broadcast or the podcast, I'm using what my wife calls my announcer voice, or my radio voice. It carries, and that's just one thing of broadcasting. You're taught, you use your broadcaster voice. It's another thing you're taught if you're an actor, especially if you're an actor on a stage. If you do a lot of plays, you project. That's all it is projecting. So when I do turn on the microphone, I do project, and I speak as if I'm speaking to the person in the back of this imaginary person in the back of the room. Let your voice carry, project. So all I'm saying is that while I project on these broadcasts and while I project and use my radio voice on these podcasts and on YouTube and anywhere else that there's a microphone, the conversations are the same. If you're sitting down with me at a bar over a beer, which sounds freaking amazing, I just need to do that. I need it. If the show grows enough over the next year, I would like to do kind of these sit downs, geek night, where we just come sit down and sit at the table and talk about nerd stuff. I know there's Nerd Night. Is that still going on? I need to reach out to those guys. Oh, Nerd Night's awesome. It was basically mini TED Talks where you have 2 or 3 presenters come up and talk about their geek thing. It was freaking amazing. But maybe I should organize something like that at a bar. Geek Therapy Night, where we just all sit around, have some beers, and talk about cool geek stuff, Star Wars and Star Trek and Raspberry Pis and computers and Xboxes and, man, space, astronomy. Not in any sort of organized thing, just we all sit around and just start talking about stuff and see other That's such a good idea. Oh, I'm going to put a pin in that. So anyways, while I use my radio voice, these are conversations that you would have with me one-on-one personally. I wasn't planning on spending this segment so personal, but I guess I will. This is the long segment. This is the 11-minute segment. I will just say that in my personal life, especially at work, and maybe it only applies to when I'm at work and I have to focus on something, I don't, I'm kind of to myself. I kind of keep to myself, and I don't talk a lot, and sometimes I feel like I'm being sort of an a-hole to people coming in wanting to be chatty. But I'm just focused on what I'm doing, whatever I'm doing. I just like to do my work and not be interrupted. And it's not an antisocial thing. I don't despise that people are coming to visit me and talk to me while I'm sitting behind the console here at work. But it's kind of like I'm focused on what I'm doing. And that said, Jeremy, who you've heard on my show many, many times, Jeremy Benson over there on The Buzz, KTBZ 94.5 The Buzz, our sister station, he'll come in and I'm in my just work mood or my focus mood, and I don't initially, have a lot to talk about, and I'm just kind of quiet. He always gets me going though. We always wind up talking about new RTX video cards or guitars or basses or drum sets and recording studio stuff and recording interfaces. And half the time he comes in here, I say, all right, I'm turning on the microphone. We're turning this into a podcast. We're turning this into the radio show. So if you ever approach me in real life, I'm very approachable. I'm not going to turn anybody away. But even if I'm in a mood where I'm just kind of quiet and contemplative, which I know sounds drastically different if your only experience with me is through the radio show or through the podcast or through YouTube, it's kind of hard to imagine me not talking, because for most of these shows, I'm just carrying it with a continuous stream of consciousness for at least 39 minutes. For the broadcast, it might sound strange that someone so seemingly talkative, would be quiet. But I'll say that's not a unique attribute, especially in radio land. There's a lot of people, I'll just use this kind of anecdote. I know Michael Berry very well over on our sister station, KTRH. I know Michael Berry very well. I'm very proud to call him a friend. I'm very proud to call him a mentor. But there's some people that might mistake him, in the halls at least, who don't know him. They might think he's being mean or something like that, or being non-personal. But I'll tell you, because he's not very talkative, and if you say hi to him in the kitchen or something, he might just be like, hey, or maybe he might not even mention that. Two things. Michael is a very eccentric man in a good way. Like, he's thinking about something. Like, he's a self-confessed geek just like me. He's thinking about stuff. He's always thinking about a show, thinking about his product. But more importantly, he's saving his voice. He's on the air for at least 5 hours a day. A lot of radio hosts simply value the times of the day where they're not talking. So any kind of span of time through the day where they don't have to talk, they don't talk. And they'll keep their interactions with people very short, but they're protecting their voice. Singers do it all the time, especially opera singers. You have to protect your voice. When I go off the air, I try not to talk so much because I just spent the last hour or so talking, and my throat is actually sore. So if you approach me in real life, and I don't think I would ever come across as douchey or an a-hole or unchatty. If you come across me in real life and want to talk about geek stuff, what you hear me talking about on the show, that's how we talk. I may not talk to you in my radio voice, but this goes back to what I was saying about just being true to who you are. When you create content, when you create a radio show, when you create a podcast, create a YouTube channel, whatever you are, whatever you're doing, whatever your medium, the best advice I got is just to be true to yourself. Just talk about what you know and just be yourself. I add radio voice to that for broadcasts, for podcasts, but what you hear is what you get as far as content and how I'll talk to you about something in real life. I will say something that's missing, though, when you have a show that's, lo and behold, it's recorded right now. You can't call up to the radio station and talk to me right now. It's one-sided. If you're just listening to a podcast, especially, it's not a call-in type of thing. It's kind of one-sided, so I can give out my information, give out my opinions, and I don't have the advantage of hearing counterpoints or the pleasure of hearing counterpoints to opinions, if there are counterpoints. But that's why I always say you can email me, geektherapy@iheartmedia.com. I always repeat it twice, geektherapy@iheartmedia.com. That's my direct work email, and I read all of them. Another good way to get in touch with me is geektherapyradio.com. Just type in www.geektherapyradio.com. Of course, if you follow on the YouTube channel, you can comment below. I see all the comments. And Twitter's good. Even though Twitter's a cesspool, I don't give into all the stupid political bullcrap. But if you want to talk nerd stuff with me, there's a few of you who do, and I very much appreciate that. From all around the world, Geek Therapy Radio on Twitter. I think technically it's at Geek Therapy KPRC. What's another way to get in touch? Facebook page, Geek Therapy Radio on Facebook. Yes, these are all plugs for the social medias and the YouTubes and stuff like that, but I'm saying, while this is pre-recorded content, please reach out to me. If you have a counterpoint with something I'm talking about, you have more information on something, or correct something, while you are listening to a recording, you can immediately get at me, virtually immediately get at me to share your thoughts on whatever I'm talking about. So it doesn't have to be so closed off. While this is a recording, it's not a closed off community here. We are living in the digital age, the social media age. You can, like I said, reach out to me in virtually instantly through all sorts of different avenues. So please do that. For the last segment coming up here, I want to talk about the writing on the wall for Gamestop. Gamestop itself is kind of a controversial company, but we'll talk about that. More Geek Therapy Radio coming up. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. Sometimes I unintentionally make little accents. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. I don't know why the Minnesota. I don't even have family in Minnesota. I have no connection to Minnesota whatsoever, other than we almost moved there in the early 90s. And if we had moved there, I'll let you behind the curtain a little bit too. We will talk about GameStop. Don't worry. That's hot on the presses right now. Minnesota, if we moved to Minnesota, we would have moved to Minneapolis, the Twin Cities, and we would have been millionaires, because part of it would have been my dad would have gone to work for a TV company. For those of you who don't know, my dad was a television anchorman. He read the news every night on TV for ABC and for the WB and for NBC over his career. He also got a start in radio, but he got an offer to go to Minnesota. He didn't take the offer. There was too much going on, too much family stuff going on. It just wasn't a good time to move the kids to a new state when we had just moved to Houston from San Antonio, blah, blah, blah. But part of the deal was supposedly a ton of stock in, what was it, DirecTV. It was when the dish TV stuff was becoming huge. It was like at the ground floor of all these satellite dish TV services, all this on-demand TV service stuff. And my dad would have been a millionaire just with that stock alone, the way that whole explosion of mass communications took off with the ugly satellite dishes that are on the roof. I've got an ugly satellite dish on the roof of my house, and all it's doing is making a leak that leaks behind the drywall and behind the stucco. Those satellite dishes are freaking hideous abominations and they're the scourge of rural America. Oh, I'm getting fired up about satellite dishes now. I think the technology is cool. We used to have a big 15-foot satellite dish in our backyard before the mini dishes came out. But anyways, that's because my dad wanted to watch the Boston Bruins in Houston, and there was no way to do that without having a big-ass satellite dish in your backyard. And I would mow under it, and he would change channels up in his man cave. And when you change channels on the satellite dish, the whole freaking thing is motorized, and it moves around to aim at a different satellite in the sky. So sometimes I would mow right under it, and the satellite dish would move and bonk me on the head while I was mowing under it. If that's not a first world problem, I don't know what is. The HOA also had a big problem with this was in Kingwood, by the way. For those of you familiar with Houston, Kingwood is kind of a la-di-da community, or some subdivisions of it especially. This was Kings Point. And the HOA had a big problem with the 15-foot satellite dish in the backyard. And basically, my dad, he put up one of those like vine fences, those thatch fences for vines to grow on to kind of mask it. And I don't think the HOA was too happy with that either, but I think maybe my dad just probably paid the fine each month. Screw it, I'm keeping my satellite dish TV. You're not going to tell me how to live my life. We're at the end of a cul-de-sac, and our back neighbors is the woods. There's not even anybody behind us. And the satellite dish is like 300 feet away from the street. No one can see it unless you're trespassing on our property. I'm getting mad about things that are 20 years old. 25 years old. Gosh, moving on to GameStop. So, I'm just not going to assume that anybody doesn't know what GameStop is, but it's a brick and mortar store that sells physical media, physical video games. So games for Xbox, games for PlayStation, games for Nintendo Switch. It sells physical copies of games, and you trade in games and buy used games, and there's very, very, very mixed feelings, mostly negative, towards GameStop. There's a running joke that if you bring in $1,000 worth of stuff to GameStop, stuff that you could sell on eBay for $1,000, even used, GameStop will say, I'll give you $2 and a copy of Mario Kart. For $1,000 worth of games. You can bring GameStop your Xbox 360, your PlayStation 4, your Nintendo Switch, and GameStop will be like, we'll give you $20 in-store credit for all of that. That is part of their business practice that, frankly, is part of their downfall, I'll just say. They were not very, I don't want to call it unethical. They were not realistic. There was still a profit to be had from trading in games and everything. They went too much for the throat. They way undersold. And you understand that bringing in used video game equipment is kind of like pawning it, except it's not pawning it. You're just selling it right to the shop. But they came in, lowball doesn't even begin to describe. Like, there was no negotiating room there. They just come in so low, there's no way to negotiate. So anyways, that was one part of the business practice that sucked. Also, they were constantly upselling you on stuff. You just want to go in, buy your game for $15. I don't want a friggin' replacement warranty. I don't want to be put on any sort of mailing list. I don't want to be put on an email list. I don't want to get notifications when new games are released. I have the internet. I know about all that stuff, probably before the store does. Just, I want to buy the game and get out. And that's why, while GameStop sucks to many people, have the opinion that it sucks, mom and pop brick and mortar used video game shops are Awesome. I'm trying to get them to endorse the show. But they all say, we have our own podcast. Like, yeah, well, you have way less listeners. Anyways, I'm not besmirching them. The podcast is great, but used video game shops are wonderful because you can also buy used video games all the way back to the original NES and Sega Genesis and the Game Gear and Game Boy games, in addition to all your modern Xbox games and PlayStation games. So back to the point of GameStop. The writing is on the wall for them because as of last year, as of 2019, 86% of all video game purchases were digital download. That means 14%, 16% of people, and it's about to be 10%. They're projecting it to be 90% people digitally downloading their games by the next round. That means 10% of people of the population are going to brick and mortar stores to buy new copies of video games. That's not good for GameStop. I don't think GameStop adapted well enough to the changing market. They came out with their new kind of investor statement, their meeting, their press whatever you want to call it, their pep talk to investors, I'll just call it, saying that the 9th generation of consoles, so the PlayStation 5 coming out in the Xbox Series X, is going to reinvigorate GameStop sales, and it looks good for the company. It's looking good for the company going into the next year. Okay, all right. That's kind of like your last little... It's kind of like in a racing game, you're in last place, and you have a little bit of nitrous boost left, and you're already 5 minutes behind the person in 9th place, and you're in 10th place, 5 minutes behind. It's too little, too late. The 9th generation of video game consoles is not going to save GameStop, unfortunately. Or fortunately, depending on how you look at it. Some people have a severe disdain for GameStop. Some people say the last time they've been to GameStop was in 1999 because they had such a bad experience trying to trade in or to sell their games to GameStop. They just felt... Actually, the one I read was a kid who at the time was 12 or 13 years old, and the store undersold him so much, lowballed him so much. The kid brought him, 100 of his games and game consoles, and the employees of the store basically offered him peanuts for what he brought in, even well below what they should have offered, what company policy had offered. The fact is that all that while ago, this is just an anecdote. I cannot verify for sure, but it doesn't sound out of the realm of possibility that they took advantage of a kid, a minor, who should have been in there with his parents to make a business agreement like that, but he wasn't. It's not far-fetched because the policy was taking advantage of people at the very get-go. Like, they were offering so low, below what the stuff was worth. And I know you come in below retail because you need to resell it, but still, it was way too low even from there. GameStop has left a bad taste in a lot of gamers' mouth, and they can't compete. They have not adapted to the modern era of how video games are sold and traded, and you know what? They might just be left to the ground under the wheels of time. I think that's just the bottom line for GameStop. Thank you for listening to Geek Therapy Radio. I want to do a quick shout out for my friends at Best Automotive in Kingwood on North Park. They're taking care of my car. It's needed a lot of work, and I very much appreciate them taking care of my modern car, and they'll take care of classic cars too. They have a lot of classics around there as well. It's a cool shop just to go into and look around at the classics that they're working on. Be good to yourselves and others. Embrace your inner geek. Know that you are loved, and I'll see you next week for more Geek Therapy Radio.